The night on planet Braska 7 was colder than any human survival guide had warned. Frost spread across the metal walls of the crashed escape pod, glowing blue under the fading twin moons. Inside, the human scout named Rylan tried to warm his hands near a small heater, his breath turning to mist every time he exhaled. He had been stranded here for almost 2 days, the rescue beacon damaged and the temperature falling lower each hour. He believed he was alone on this frozen world until he heard it. A soft trembling voice from outside the pod. A voice he had never expected to hear in this place. "Human, please, let me in." Rylan froze, staring at the door, his pulse rising. No one should be alive out there in this cold. No human, no creature, nothing with flesh. The voice spoke again, weaker this time. "Please, it is so cold. I cannot survive." Rylan grabbed his flashlight and slowly unlatched the pod door, letting a thin wave of freezing air sweep inside. Standing at the entrance was a young alien girl, no older than 20 in human years. Her skin shimmered with silver tones, her eyes glowing faint blue, her body shaking so much she could barely stand. She was wrapped in torn survival cloth that did nothing to stop the deadly chill. Rylan stepped back in shock. He recognized her species. A Lemurian, a race known to avoid humans at all costs. They believed humans were unpredictable, dangerous, and too powerful to trust. Yet here she was, begging him for help, begging to enter his shelter. Rylan didn't trust easily, but he could see she was dying. He moved aside and pointed her to the small heater. "You can come in, but no sudden moves," he warned. She nodded quickly and stepped inside, her legs nearly collapsing beneath her. For several minutes she stayed near the heater without speaking. Her trembling stopped slowly, but she still hugged herself tightly. Rylan watched her carefully, unsure what she wanted or why she had approached him alone in the frozen darkness. Finally she looked at him, her voice soft. "I know you do not trust me, but I have nowhere else to go." Rylan raised an eyebrow. "What happened to your group?" She looked away, her expression darkening. "They left me behind." Her voice cracked. "Humans did not do this, my own crew did." Rylan felt a small sting of sympathy. Even in the harshest worlds, betrayal hurt the same. He handed her a thermal blanket. She stared at it like she had never seen one before. Her people avoided human tech. Yet now she held it like a lifeline. Minutes passed in silence until she spoke again. "Human, I need to ask you something important." Her fingers tightened around the blanket. Rylan sensed tension building. This was it. The moment something strange would happen. The moment that would change the entire night. She looked directly into his eyes, her voice shaking. "May I share your sleeping bag?" Rylan blinked hard. "What?" he asked, thinking he misheard. She repeated slowly. "The night is too cold, the heater is weak, and my body cannot survive alone. If I stay like this I will die before sunrise." Rylan's mind raced. Sharing a sleeping bag meant close contact. No distance, no safety, no room to defend himself if she tried anything. But he could see fear in her eyes. Not fear of him. Fear of the night outside. Fear of freezing to death. She continued. "You do not understand. Lemurians lose heat faster than humans. This cold kills us quickly. Please, let me stay close for warmth." A long silence filled the pod. Rylan looked at the sleeping bag, his only real protection against the cold. He looked at the alien girl, shaking, desperate, terrified. He could turn her away, risk her dying, or even attacking out of panic. Or he could let her in. And trust someone who had been raised to fear humans. Rylan finally gave a slow nod. "All right, but we do this carefully." Her eyes softened with relief. "You have saved my life," she whispered. She moved closer, nervous but grateful. As she slipped into the sleeping bag beside him, Rylan expected tension. But instead he felt something else. A strange calm. A connection forming in the frozen silence. Outside, the wind howled like a beast hunting its prey. Inside, two beings from different worlds shared warmth in a fragile moment of trust. But unknown to both of them. The cold was not the only danger on Braska 7. Something lurked in the darkness. Watching the pod. Listening. Waiting. And their night was only just beginning. The sleeping bag was barely big enough for one person. Now it held two beings from two different worlds, both trying to stay alive in the freezing night. Rylan could feel the alien girl's trembling slowly fade as their shared warmth grew. Her silvery skin gave off a faint glow, reflecting the heater's dim light like moonlight on ice. For several minutes neither of them spoke. The wind outside howled through the cracks of the escape pod, rattling the metal frame. Rylan listened carefully, every sense alert. He did not trust this planet, not after seeing the strange patterns carved into the snow earlier. The alien girl, still wrapped tightly in the sleeping bag, finally whispered, "My name is Ela." Rylan nodded. "You can rest, Ela, you're safe for now." But she shook her head softly. "No, we are not safe, human." Her voice shivered again, not from the cold but from fear. Rylan tensed inside the sleeping bag. "What do you mean?" Ela swallowed, her glowing eyes looking at the pod door as if expecting something to break in. "There is something on this planet, something that hunts the warmth of living bodies." Rylan frowned. "You mean an animal?" She shook her head. "No, not animal. It is old, older than any species here, older than our maps." Her hands clutched the sleeping bag tighter. "My crew detected its movement under the ice, but before they could leave, it attacked." Rylan felt a cold shiver crawl across his spine despite the warmth. If something could kill trained explorers before they escaped, it was dangerous, far more dangerous than the freezing wind outside. Ela continued in a soft whisper. "It tracks heat, it follows the warmth of breathing bodies, that is why I needed to be close to you." Rylan blinked, then whispered back. "You're saying it can sense us inside the pod?" Ela nodded slowly. "It can sense everything, but staying close together hides the heat signature, makes it appear as one small source, not two." Rylan took a deep breath. If she was right, then the thing outside might already know they were here. But before he could say anything, a loud metallic thud echoed across the pod's outer hull. A heavy, dragging sound followed, scraping against the metal like claws sliding down a wall. Ela froze completely. Her breath stopped. Her glowing eyes widened with terror. "It found us," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Rylan slowly reached for his sidearm under the blanket, careful not to make noise. The creature outside dragged itself around the pod, the sound deep and slow. Every scrape made the walls vibrate. Every thud rattled the bolts. Ela buried her face against the sleeping bag fabric, her body shaking again. Rylan whispered, "Stay calm, it will go away if it thinks we're a single small heat source." But the scraping sound didn't go away. It moved toward the door. Then it stopped completely. Silence filled the pod. A silence far more terrifying than the noise. Rylan held his breath. Ela gripped his arm tightly. Not even the wind dared to make a sound. Then, a single loud inhale came from outside, like something massive smelling the air. Sniffing for life. Sniffing for them. Ela whispered into Rylan's chest. "It knows, we are here, it wants warmth, it wants life." Rylan kept the sidearm ready, though he knew bullets might not matter against something living under frozen ice. He steadied his breathing, letting the sleeping bag trap their combined heat. Minutes passed, long, painful minutes. Finally, the scraping sound began again, but this time it moved away from the pod slowly, inch by inch. Ela exhaled shakily. "It is leaving, for now." Rylan whispered, "What exactly is that thing?" She shook her head. "No name, no records. My people only marked this planet as forbidden." Her voice trembled. "But my crew was curious, they ignored the warnings." Rylan studied her face. "So they left you behind? Why?" Ela looked down at her hands, guilt in her eyes. "I argued with them," she admitted. "I told them to follow the warnings, they said I was weak, too fearful." Her voice tightened. "When the creature rose from under the ice, they ran, and left me to distract it." Rylan felt anger rise inside him. Leaving someone behind was unforgivable. And using her as bait? Even worse. "You're not weak," Rylan said softly. "You survived alone in this cold, without proper gear, that's strength." Ela looked up slowly, surprised by the compliment. Humans were known to be harsh, direct, reckless. Yet this human spoke gently, protectively. Before she could answer, the pod shook suddenly. A distant roar echoes across the frozen landscape. Deep, furious, shaking the ground under them. Ela's eyes widened again. "That is not the same one," she whispered. Rylan stiffened. "You mean there are more of them?" She nodded. "Many more, and they are waking." Rylan looked at the pod walls that now felt much thinner than before. The night was far from over, and surviving it would not be easy. Outside, the ice cracked like thunder. Something massive was moving beneath it. Something bigger than the first creature. Rylan tightened his grip on Ela as the sleeping bag shook. "We fight at sunrise," he whispered. "If we live that long." Ela closed her eyes. "Then we stay together, until the first light." But the darkness outside was gathering strength. and sunrise felt impossibly far away. The escape pod trembled again as another roar echoed across the frozen valley. This roar was deeper, heavier, like mountains grinding against each other. Rylan tightened his arm around Ela, keeping her close inside the sleeping bag so their heat would blend. Every instinct in his body warned him that something far worse than the first creature was now awake. Ela clung to the blanket, her glowing eyes filled with fear. "This planet was once a battlefield," she whispered. "Old stories say giants made of ice lived here long before our star maps were written." Rylan frowned. "Giants? Not animals?" Ela nodded slowly. "Not animals, something else, something born from the cold itself." Outside, another roar shook the ground, sending small flakes of frost falling from the ceiling of the pod. Rylan listened carefully, memorizing the patterns of the sounds. There were at least 2, maybe 3 creatures moving out there. He whispered, "We need a plan." Ela swallowed. "There is only one plan: survive until sunrise, that is when the giant ice creatures return underground." Rylan took a deep breath. Survive until sunrise, that was the only option. But sunrise on Braska 7 was still hours away. The temperature would drop lower and the creatures would grow more active. A sudden thump hit the back of the pod. Then a dragging, scraping sound began again, circling them. Rylan pressed his ear against the metal. He heard heavy breaths, slow, cold, and hungry. Ela whispered, "It smells our warmth, it will not stop." Rylan reached for the pod's emergency door lever. "We can't sit here waiting to be crushed." Ela grabbed his hand quickly. "No, opening the door will make the heat escape, it will sense the exact shape of our bodies." Rylan froze. She was right. Any heat leak could reveal them perfectly to whatever was prowling outside. Then the creature outside slammed the pod again, this time so hard that the floor shook beneath them. A sharp metallic creak echoed from the right side. One of the support beams had cracked. Rylan cursed under his breath. "This pod won't last long." Ela's voice trembled. "If it breaks through, it will drag us out, the cold will do the rest." Rylan forced himself to stay calm. He needed information. "Your crew, how did they escape?" Ela lowered her head. "They didn't escape, they ran toward the caves in the east, but those caves lead deeper into the ice. None of them returned." That wasn't helpful. But something else in her words caught his attention. "The caves," he whispered. "Do the creatures go there too?" Ela blinked. "No, the caves are warm inside, geothermal vents, that is why my crew ran there. The warmth might hide their heat signatures better than this metal shell." Rylan made a decision. "We're heading to those caves at sunrise." Ela nodded. "Yes, but sunrise is far away." Outside, the creature thumped the door again, harder this time. The entire frame bent inward by a few inches, making Ela gasp. Rylan gritted his teeth. "We can't let it break through." He reached for the emergency flare gun strapped under the seat. Ela's eyes widened. "No, human, fire will attract them more." Rylan shook his head. "No, this flare isn't fire, it's blinding light and heat in one burst." Ela hesitated. "That might confuse them, but only for a moment." Another slam hit the pod. The door bent even further inward. Ela whimpered and pressed closer into the sleeping bag. Rylan steadied his aim at the door. "Moment is enough," he whispered. The creature outside paused. Rylan sensed movement, massive, slow, coming closer. Then, a claw-like shape punched into the metal, ripping a long tear. Cold wind blasted inside the pod instantly, making Ela gasp and grab Rylan tighter. Rylan aimed directly at the opening and fired the flare gun. A burst of white-hot light exploded outside, illuminating the creature's silhouette for a split second. It was enormous, towering with a long spine made of frozen plates, its limbs stretched unnaturally. It roared in pain as the light seared its icy armor. The ground shook as it staggered backward, retreating into the storm. Ela clutched Rylan's arm. "You heard it, humans truly are dangerous." Rylan took a deep breath. "We bought time, but only minutes." The hole in the pod continued leaking heat rapidly. The temperature inside dropped sharply. Ela's breath became shaky again. "My body cannot handle this. I will freeze." Rylan quickly pulled her even closer and wrapped the sleeping bag tighter around them. "We'll make it, stay awake." She nodded weakly. But her glowing skin dimmed slightly, an alarming sign. Rylan rubbed her arms to keep her warm. "You're not dying on my watch." Ela whispered softly. "You sound like someone who has lost before." Rylan didn't answer. He had lost people, too many. But he wasn't losing her too. Outside, another roar came, closer this time. The ground trembled again. A second creature had arrived. Maybe even a third. Rylan whispered, "They're gathering." Ela closed her eyes. "They know we hurt one of them. Now more will come." Rylan held her tighter. "Good," he whispered. "Then let them come, we just need to survive the night." But even he felt a chill deeper than the cold outside. Because now the creatures were not just hunting. They were angry. The ice cracked loudly. Something huge rose from beneath the frozen ground, even bigger than the creature he had shot. Ela's eyes widened as she looked through the torn metal. "That one is the oldest," she whispered. Rylan gripped his weapon tightly. "This night keeps getting worse." The giant ice beast turned toward the pod. Its glowing cracks pulsed like blue fire beneath the ice, and its roar shook the mountains. The true battle for survival was just beginning. The ground shook so violently that frost fell from the ceiling like shattered glass. Rylan instinctively wrapped his arm around Ela, shielding her as the escape pod groaned under the immense pressure outside. The oldest creature, massive, ancient, and glowing from within, stood like a frozen mountain brought to life. Its body was covered in thick ice plates, each one cracked with blue light pulsing beneath the surface. Ela stared through the torn metal opening in horror. "That one. The legends say it only wakes during the deadest cold, when the planet is at its darkest hour." Rylan tightened the sleeping bag around them to preserve heat as another icy roar echoed across the valley. The creature's breath spilled out like a blizzard, sweeping over the pod and dimming the heater instantly. The temperature dropped so sharply that Ela gasped, her glowing skin fading again. Rylan cursed under his breath. "We can't let this thing freeze us inside." Ela clutched his arm. "Human, that creature is thousands of years old, it will not stop until all warmth is gone." The giant ice beast moved closer, each step shaking the ground. A smaller creature followed behind it, dragging its huge limbs across the frozen soil like a shadow. Rylan knew the pod wouldn't hold, not with the hole in its side and not with monsters this size outside. Then the huge creature paused. Its massive head lowered, glowing cracks flickering as it studied the pod. Almost like it was smelling the warmth inside. Almost like it understood the shape of its prey. A deep rumble vibrated the air. Ela whispered, "It knows we are here, it knows exactly where the warmth is strongest." Rylan's grip on her tightened. He whispered, "We need to move, now." "But it is outside," Ela replied with fear in her voice. "It will sense us the moment we step out." Rylan shook his head. "No, it will sense us if we stay too. This pod is turning into a heat beacon." Another slam hit the side of the pod, bending the metal inward even more. Ela cried out softly as the impact shook both of them inside the sleeping bag. Rylan steadied her, whispering, "Stay with me." The giant creature released a low, thunderous growl. It reached one massive clawed limb toward the pod roof, gripping the edge with strength enough to tear steel apart. Metal creaked loudly under its weight. Ela's voice trembled. "Human, if it opens the pod we will not survive even 1 minute out there." Rylan made a quick decision. "Then we don't wait for it to tear it open." He reached under the seat for his last emergency item, a hardshell heat disruptor device. Ela gasped when she saw it. That is human military tech. My people feared those." Rylan nodded. "It scrambles heat signatures for a few minutes." Ela blinked. "That might hide us long enough to escape." "Exactly," Rylan whispered. "But once we're outside we run for the caves." A massive crack sounded above them as the creature began pulling on the pod roof like it was peeling open a can. Time was running out. Rylan activated the heat disruptor, and the device hummed loudly, releasing a wave of static temperature. Instantly, the warm air around them began scattering. The creature paused outside, confused by the sudden shift in heat signatures. Ela's eyes widened. "It cannot sense us clearly anymore." Rylan grabbed the sleeping bag tighter around her. "Good enough," he whispered. "We go now." He held her close and slid toward the torn side of the pod, careful to stay silent. Outside, the giant creature raised its head, sniffing the frozen air with frustration. The smaller creature screeched, confused by the scattered warmth. Rylan moved slowly, step by step, holding Ela as close as possible. Their combined heat was now hidden, masked under the heat disruptor's distortion field. They slipped out of the pod into the icy air. Cold so sharp it felt like needles against their skin. Ela's legs weakened instantly. "My body cannot handle this cold, without shelter." Rylan lifted her onto his back. "I'll carry you." her arms wrapped around him weakly. "You will freeze," she whispered. Rylan exhaled, breath turning to ice mist. "Humans are tougher than we look." They moved across the snow, step by careful step. The giant creature turned unexpectedly, its glowing cracks flickering violently as it looked in their direction. Ela held her breath. It sensed something. Rylan froze completely. Every muscle in his body tightened. He could feel Ela trembling on his back. If the creature moved even one step toward them, it was over. The smaller creature screeched again, confusion echoing across the frozen valley. The giant turned toward it, interpreting the scrambled heat as the smaller creature's mistake. Then, with a deep roar, it slammed its claw into the snow, sending a shockwave across the ground. But moving away from Rylan and Ela. Rylan whispered, "Now we go." He moved quickly toward a distant line of dark rocks. The caves, warm caves, were hidden somewhere behind them. Ela whispered in his ear, "Human, you are risking your life for me, why?" Rylan answered quietly, "Because someone left you behind, someone should have stayed." Ela's eyes softened. "No human has ever spoken to me like that." Rylan kept moving, his breath growing heavy. "I'm not every human." Suddenly the ground cracked beneath them. A deep, echoing fracture ran across the ice, splitting the surface. A huge shadow moved underneath. The largest creature yet was rising directly under their path. Ela gasped. "It is beneath us, run human, run." Rylan gathered every last bit of strength, and sprinted toward the rocks as the ice shattered behind him. The giant beneath them roared, ripping through the surface. Snow exploded into the air like a storm. The creature lunged, its massive arm reaching for them. Rylan dove behind a large rock with Ela tight in his arms. The creature's claws missed them by inches. Ela gasped. "The cave. I see it, just ahead." Rylan looked up. A dark, narrow opening warmed by faint golden steam waited ahead of them. Their only hope. Their only chance. But the creature was still rising behind them. And sunrise was still far away. Snow and shards of ice exploded behind Rylan as the creature rose fully from the ground. Its glowing cracks lit up the dark valley like blue lightning. Ela held onto Rylan with the last of her strength, her voice shaking in his ear. "Human, if it reaches us, it will crush both of us." Rylan didn't answer. He was focused on the cave, only 30 meters away. A narrow opening glowing with faint gold mist, a sign of geothermal heat. The only place on this frozen world where life could hide. The ground cracked again. A massive clawed arm reached toward them, sweeping aside rocks like dust. Rylan ducked and rolled, still holding Ela on his back. A chunk of ice slammed into the ground where they had stood a heartbeat ago. Ela gasped. "It is too close, too strong." Rylan forced himself up. His muscles ached, his breath burned in his chest. But he ran again, pushing against the freezing wind. Ela whispered, "You will freeze, your body cannot take this cold." Rylan didn't slow down. "I'm not dying here," he whispered. "Not when we're this close." The creature roared behind them. The sound shook the air like thunder. Ela looked back and cried out, "It is charging, it will catch us." Rylan didn't look back. He used every ounce of strength remaining and sprinted the last distance. The ground trembled violently as the giant ice beast lunged forward, smashing through the rocks. Ela gripped his shoulders tightly. "Rylan, now, jump." Rylan didn't hesitate. He pushed off the ground and dove into the narrow cave entrance just as the creature's massive claw swept past. Snow burst into the cave like a wave. But the creature's arm couldn't fit into the narrow opening. It roared in frustration, slamming both its claws against the rocky cliffs. The entire cave shook, dust raining down from above. Ela buried her face against Rylan's chest, whispering, "It cannot enter, but it knows we are inside." Rylan lowered her gently onto the warm cave floor. Heat radiated from cracks in the stone, soft, golden warmth that felt like breathing fire. Ela's glowing skin brightened slightly as she absorbed the heat. She let out a shaky breath. "I can survive here, this warmth, it is saving me." Rylan sank to his knees, exhausted. His hands were trembling from the cold. Ela reached for his arm gently. "Human, you saved me." Rylan brushed off the words. "I didn't drag you all the way out here to hear you thank me." Ela smiled softly. "Then I will thank you later, when you cannot escape." Rylan gave a weak laugh. But then the cave entrance darkened. The giant creature's face pressed against the rock, its glowing eyes staring directly in. It couldn't reach them, but it could block the entrance. And it could wait. Ela whispered. It will stay until the coldest hour, when its strength is highest. Rylan nodded. And when is that? Ela looked down. Soon, very soon. Rylan sat beside her, thinking fast. The creature couldn't enter, but it could trap them inside. If they stayed here too long, the smaller creatures would join it, sealing off the cave completely. A distant rumble echoed deeper inside the cave. Rylan turned. What was that? Ela's eyes widened. Geothermal vent shift. The heat pressure changes near sunrise. Rylan suddenly understood. So when the sunlight reaches the valley, the underground heat rises. Ela nodded slowly. Yes, the creatures hate heat. That is why they return underground at first light. Rylan looked at the cave entrance. We just need to survive, until the first sunlight touches the rocks. Outside, the giant creature growled. Its icy breath spilled into the cave, cooling the air again. Ela shivered. It is trying to freeze the cave, to weaken us. Rylan moved closer to her again, wrapping the thermal blanket around them both. Ela leaned against him, her body still weak but warming. You humans always give warmth, she whispered softly. Rylan laughed quietly. Usually we take warmth. Her faint smile returned. Not you. Hours passed slowly. The creature outside blocked the wind, blocked the moonlight, blocked everything. But every few minutes it shifted or roared, trying to scare them, trying to break them, trying to wait out their last breath. Rylan stayed awake, keeping Ela warm, but the cold still seeped into his bones. Ela noticed. She pressed her hands to his chest, sharing her own warmth. You gave too much. I will give some back. Rylan shook his head weakly. You need your strength. Ela whispered. But I need you alive. A faint light appeared outside. A pale blue glow at first, then soft gold. Ela gasped. The sun, it is rising. The giant creature roared. Its icy plates began to crack loudly under the sudden warmth from the sky. Steam rose from its body. Its glowing cracks dimmed, flickered, and then faded. It staggered back from the cave entrance, roaring in agony as sunlight touched its massive form. Ela held Rylan's hand. It is leaving. It must return underground, now. The creature turned and slammed itself into the ice field, disappearing beneath the ground with a final thunderous roar. Silence followed. The cave warmed again. Ela leaned her head on Rylan's shoulder, exhausted but smiling. We survived, she whispered. Rylan nodded slowly. Yeah, somehow. Ela looked at him gently. You risked everything for me, a stranger, an alien. Rylan gave a tired smile. You're not a stranger anymore. Ela's glowing eyes softened. Then let us leave this frozen world together. Rylan nodded. Together? Outside, the first true rays of sunlight touched the valley, and two beings from different worlds prepared to face whatever came next. Not alone, but side by side. Their story of survival had begun in the cold, but it would continue in the warmth they found in each other.